So today's class we will discuss about the diuretics. See, what are diuretics? Diuretics are the agents which increase urine output. Okay. So diuretics are the agents which increase the urine output mainly. So how does they increase the urine output? Before we go into discussion of these diuretics. So diuretics are the agents or the drugs which increase the urine output are known as diuretic drugs. Then diuresis, increase in urine output is known as the diuresis. So before we start the drugs, let us see some uh, concepts behind the this diuresis. We all know that terms like osmotic pressure, then concentration, and one more thing that you should all know is about the what you call uh, the sodium ions. See, in urine, not only in urine, in our body, we have very many electrolytes, positive ions and negative ions, sodium, potassium, calcium, then magnesium. So these are the positive ions which are present in the uh, body. Apart from that, we have the chlorides, negative ions, then phosphates. Okay. So these are few uh, negative and positively charged ions which are present in the body and act as electrolytes. So whenever we have the sodium ion, then we mean that the sodium ion in our body is associated with water. Okay, so that water we call it as associated water. So the surroundings of the sodium ion, you will have the associated water molecules. So whenever there is movement of these sodium ions, we have to keep in mind that there is also movement of, along with the sodium ions, there is also movement of the water molecules. So if the water molecules are moving into the membrane, automatically, mainly these, if the sodium ions are moving in and out, along with that, they also take with them the water molecules. So by this way, so now the concept is, if you are able to increase, that is excretion of the sodium ions, then we will be able to also increase the excretion of water. Okay, so did you get the concept? So if you are able to excrete out or increase the sodium ions secretion from the body, then automatically water molecules also will be coming out from the body. Okay, so this is the main concept, that is the associated water. So the organ in our body which is responsible for urine output is the kidney.
Kidney.
So the kidney, this is the anatomical structure of kidney. So it has got the renal, that is, you have the renal cortex. This is the renal cortex, then renal medulla, okay, then renal capsule. You can just see the outer part of it, and then minor calyx, and then major calyx. Minor calyx means all the nephrons will drain out into a common duct, that is called as minor calyx, and these minor calyx, two or more, will combine to form, which to open up into a bigger tubule which is known as major calyx. Then renal columns, that is, this is the region bunch of nephrons is called as renal columns, and then renal filament, the bunch of the nephrons together, they are called as renal pyramids. And then renal pelvis, the tube which is coming out from the kidney is called as renal pelvis, and then the tube which joins the nephron with the urinary bladder is called as the ureter. So in exam, they may ask you the structure of the anatomical structure of kidney, then we must be able to write this. Then coming to the next slide. See here we have what is the basic functional unit of kidney is the nephron. Okay, so nephron is the basic functional unit of kidney. So the different parts of the nephron are, you can see this is the blood vessel where it comes and it is distributed in the Bowman's capsule. Okay, and these are the glomerulus. Okay, and then this is afferent arteriole, and this is efferent arteriole. So blood will be flowing in this direction. It goes here, it gets filtered, and then the other part is coming here. Okay. Then the layers of the Bowman's capsule, visceral layer, parietal layer, and then capsular space, which is together called as Bowman's capsule. Then you have the next part, that is the contents which are being filtered through the Bowman's capsule. Then they will move into the tube, which is called as the proximal convoluted tube. Okay, and then it goes down, and then it forms a U-shaped structure, which is the lower part. This part is called as the descending loop of Henle, and this is called as the ascending loop. So this is ascending, and this is descending loop of Henle. And then after that, the next portion is called as the distal convoluted tubule. This is the portion which is called as the distal convolution tubule, and which drain out into a common duct called as collecting tubules. So this is called as the collecting tubule. So now here we have different colored arrows present. So the green color arrows, what they represent is, so this portion is given with the green arrows. So filtration takes place at this particular part, and then pressure forces water and dissolved substances from the glomerular blood into Bowman's capsule, and the amount is 125 ml per minute. We know that blood in the blood vessel is moving at a force, so that force is responsible for the filtration process. And then once it is filtered, then you can see the blue arrows here, and then here, and here, and here, and this patient. So these places, the reabsorption takes place. So the return of substances from the filtrate to the blood and interstitial fluid occurs at these blue arrowed portions, and water by osmosis, NaCl, glucose, and amino acids by active transport. So water is being absorbed by the osmosis process, and apart from that, the some of the important electrolytes, the sodium chloride, then apart from that, glucose and amino acids, some of the amino acids, they are absorbed back into the body by active transport. So by osmosis water and by active transport, the remaining things are being absorbed. So you can just see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 places the absorption, reabsorption, we call it as reabsorption, because the absorption will be taking place at the different portions. And then secretion, the active release of, so this is represented by brown colored arrows here, and here you have mainly the 2 places. So secretion, the active release of substances by the tubular lining cells in the nephron tubule. So at the first, here you have again 3 portions or 3 ways. So it gets rid of toxins and residues. The first use of secretion is they get rid of toxins and residues, and second is electrolyte balance and mostly releasing potassium ions, and thirdly acid-base balance by releasing H plus and NH4 plus, which is called as the ammonium ion. So acidic and basic, NH4 plus acidic, and H plus also acidic. Okay, so this is the different parts of the nephron and what is the function of each part of the nephron. Then coming to the next portion. So in normal physiology of urine formation, there are four major anatomical sites along the nephron that are responsible for the bulk Na plus reabsorption. So why are we more concerned of Na plus reabsorption? Because when the reabsorption of Na plus ions takes place into the body, that means once it is filtered in the Bowman's capsule, again it is reabsorbed. Okay, so that process is called as the reabsorption process. And when these Na plus ions are reabsorbed into the body, then along with them there is associated water which is also being absorbed. So this process, that is these four sites or anatomical sites are responsible for retaining the water in the body. So though the kidney is responsible for excretion of majority of the liquid portions along with the toxins and other unwanted substances, it is also responsible for again reabsorption of the required electrolytes and sometimes water. Okay, so the different sites here are the convoluted and straight portions of the proximal tubule, and then the thick ascending limb of Henle's loop, the distal convoluted tubule, and the fourth one is the connecting tubule and the cortical collecting tubule. So these are the four sites at which the reabsorption of sodium takes place. Now, if you are able to prevent the reabsorption of sodium ions into the body, then the process of the diuresis is being achieved. Okay, so if you want to excrete more amount of water from the kidneys, then we should prevent the reabsorption of water, and automatically the water reabsorption also will be stopped, and thereby more amount of urine will be formed and you can excrete out. So now, why are we more concerned of this excretion of urine or the water from the body? See, these drugs are used as anti-hypertensive drugs. Okay? Diuretic agents are used as anti-hypertensive drugs. Why how they act as anti-hypertensive drugs? See, blood volume is one of the important factor which contributes to the hypertension. So more than the required volume you have, okay, then we have to reduce the blood volume so that there is less pressure on the heart and as well as the blood vessels, and thereby it leads to reduction in the increased blood pressure. Okay, so that is how the water is going to play a role in the hypertension. So remove the water or reduce the blood volume, thereby we can reduce the blood pressure. Okay, that is the main concept here. Then let's go to the next, the mechanism of action of these diuretic agents. So based on the site on which part of the nephron the drugs are acting, that we are going to study now. We'll see that. So site 1, so this site, what happens at this particular site, the Na plus transport system responsible for the reabsorption of Na plus and associated solids in the proximal tubule. So in the proximal tubule means just the next to the Bowman's capsule is called as the proximal tubule. And then at that particular part, the first thing is transcellular reabsorption of Na plus slash HCO3 minus, which is controlled by carbonic anhydrase. Okay, so here we have to talk of an enzyme known as carbonic anhydrase. So what does this enzyme do is, so this enzyme carbonic anhydrase, what it does is, it reacts with the carbonic acid, that is the H2O and CO2. Here H2O. See, this water is present in the cells, and we know that carbon dioxide is also generated by the cells during the respiration process. So they combine together to form carbonic acid, H2CO3. So this is catalyzed by the enzyme carbonic anhydrase, and the same enzyme is also responsible for the breakdown of the carbonic acid into H plus ion plus HCO3 minus. Okay, so H plus and HCO3 minus is the ion that are formed and which is catalyzed by carbonic anhydrase. So this is the acidic ion and this is the basic ion. So and the acidic ion which is formed. So this is the lumen of the nephron, and this is this particular. So this particular part is lumen of the nephron, and this particular part is the interstitial cells. Okay. So the cells which are lining the tubule. So the carbonic anhydrase enzyme is present in that particular cells, and it catalyzes the formation of H plus and HCO3 minus. So the H plus HCO3 minus stays in the cells, whereas the H plus ions are being excreted into the lumen. Okay, that is, and at the same time with the movement of H plus ion, there is absorption of the Na plus ion. This you all have to note. So our main aim is to reduce the ions in the body. That means we have to prevent this particular part. We don't want sodium ions into the body. Okay, so thereby what we have to do is this can be prevented by inhibiting the formation of H plus and HCO3 minus. How can we prevent the formation of this H plus and HCO3 minus? If you are able to prevent the formation of carbonic acid, how are we going to reduce the formation of carbonic acid? If you can stop the activity of carbonic anhydrase enzyme, that means we have to and inhibit the carbonic anhydrase enzyme. Thereby, the formation of carbonic acid doesn't take place, and thereby the H plus ions are not formed and they are not excreted. And during the excretion of H plus ion, no sodium ions will be reabsorbed. So thereby the reabsorption of sodium ions can be prevented. So examples in this class are the acetazolamide is one drug which is responsible for the inhibition of carbonic anhydrase. Then transcellular reabsorption of the other things that can occur are the transcellular reabsorption of Na plus coupled to glucose, amino acid and phosphate. Apart from the sodium ions which are absorbed through the H plus and Na plus transport system, we also have the reabsorption of transcellular reabsorption of sodium ions along with glucose. So for every absorption of one glucose molecule, there is absorption of one sodium ion. Similarly, the amino acid and sodium ion, and then phosphate with sodium ion. So these things are not being controlled, but we can control the absorption at this particular portion. Okay. Then moving to the next slide, that is the site 2. So we have seen at the proximal tubule, we have to inhibit the what you call this reabsorption of sodium ion, which can be done by the inhibition of carbonic anhydrase enzyme. Then the site 2, so in the site 2, the Na plus K plus Cl minus transport system is being inhibited. So here, once the sodium ions are in the lumen, that is excreted from the Bowman's capsule, there is a one active transport system known as Na plus K plus Cl minus transport system. So what this transport system does is, for every 3 atoms of sodium ions, there are 6 chloride ions which are being absorbed. So 6 chloride ions are in and 3 Na plus ions are in. So now if you are able to inhibit this active transport system of Na plus K plus ion transport system, thereby we can prevent the reabsorption of sodium ions. So this is mainly, this takes place at the thick ascending loop of Henle. Okay, so this is the second site where we are going to target. Okay, so the examples of drugs which are acting at this particular portion are furosemide and ethacrynic acid. So in the first, the site, it is the carbonic anhydrase inhibitors. Example was the inhibitor was the example which we have seen in that category is the acetazolamide, and in this, the second site which prevents the Na plus K plus Cl minus co-transport system, it is the furosemide and ethacrynic acid are the examples. And then site 3, the site 3, what it does is the transport system responsible for the reabsorption of Na plus and Cl minus in the water impermeable distal convoluted tubule. So ascending, first one was in the proximal tubule, second one was the ascending tubule, and now it is the uh, distal convoluted tubule, site 3, which is responsible for the reabsorption process. There is Na plus Cl minus co-transport system is present. So there is, for every sodium ion, there is one chloride ion being reabsorbed. So if we can prevent the reabsorption process, then we can, so this is also an active transport system. If you are able to co-transport system, it is called a co-transport system. So drugs acting at this site are thiazide and thiazide like diuretics. They prevent this co-transport system and thereby prevent the reabsorption of water and sodium ions. Then the apart from that, you have the site 4, which is called as the that is, which is responsible for the presence of principal cells. So what this principal cells do is they have the target for the hormone known as aldosterone. So the Na plus transport system responsible for reabsorption of sodium ions in the connecting and cortical tubules. So here reabsorption of sodium and potassium secretion takes place in the principal cells. Okay, and then H plus formation and secretion of other secretion occurs in the intercalated cells, and then spironolactone inhibits Na plus reabsorption by competitively antagonizing the effects of aldosterone on the principal cells. So here the spironolactone will competitively or will compete for the aldosterone hormone and thereby the prevent the action of the site 4. Then the other drugs are, that is triamptrin and amiloride. They will plug the sodium ions in the luminal membrane of the principal cells, thereby preventing sodium reabsorption and K plus and H plus secretion. Okay, so the main mechanism of this triamptrin and amiloride is they are physically going to plug the channel. Okay, so they act as a plugs to the channel, and thereby when these sodium ions are there, then the what you call the spironolactone will go and plug the area, and there is no entry for the sodium ions. Okay, so that is spironolactone acts by the aldosterone mechanism, whereas triamptrin and amiloride will act as a plug at the channel and then prevent the sodium ions. Okay, so thus while producing a modest natriuretis, these drugs prevent potassium loss and are commonly referred as potassium sparing diuretics. So the main feature of these diuretic agents in this class is that they prevent the there is loss of potassium from the body by retaining, or we can say they will retain the potassium ions in the body. So that's why they are called as potassium sparing diuretics. So they will prevent reabsorption of sodium. At the same time, they are also going to retain the potassium ions in the body. That's why they are called as the potassium sparing diuretics. Then coming to the next part, this is just the summary of what we have discussed now. So diuretics that act at site 1 by inhibiting carbonic anhydrase enzyme may inhibit the reabsorption of the urine up to filtered load of sodium up to 20 to 25%, and but are not efficacious at this as one might think, because the three major sites of Na plus reabsorption downstream, that is site 2, site 3, and site 4, by reabsorbing the most of the extra Na plus presented to them. So this is not the best site for us to prevent the reabsorption process, because the 20 to 25% only it is the target. Another 75% of the ions are being reabsorbed from the other 2, 3, and 4 sites. So diuretics that inhibit the reabsorption of Na plus site 2 are most efficacious, because site 2 is normally responsible for reabsorption of up to 30% of the filtered load, and the 2 Na plus reabsorption sites downstream 3 and 4 are relatively low capacity. So that's why this site 2 they are also called as high ceiling diuretics because maximum. So in GPAT question, they will ask you what is the site which is responsible for having the highest diuresis process. Then it is site 2. Then diuretics, that is, so site 2 means Na plus K plus Cl minus transport system. Okay, so the next diuretics that act at site 2 frequently referred as high celiac or loop diuretics. Why they are called as loop diuretics? Because they act at the loop of Henle. That's why they are called as loop diuretics. And high ceiling diuretics because they have got the maximum capacity. Then diuretics that act at site 3 and 4 are less efficacious because of only 5 to 8%, 2 to 3%, and 2 to 3% are filtered of the filtered load of Na plus are being Na plus respectively are being prevented. So site 2 and site 3 are less efficacious in the diuresis process. So we'll